I'll start the recording.
Yeah.
Right. So, what are the topics that we discussed in the morning?
Uh, Regarding the XML,
That's correct. So, we discussed more
what is
about the XML.
XML? Then, yeah. Then, what are the XML documents we are having? How we actually convert the XML schema into the DML, and what are the different components usually we use for the XML? XML
Correct.
split, XML combine, and reformat XML.
Correct. That's right. So, XML components we discussed. So, where we discussed about
Yeah.
XML split for reading the XML data and creating multiple category-wise flattened data. XML combine.
Yes.
If we have to create, so if you have to create an XML document using an input data which has the sequence numbers which are expected by the XML combine to create an XML document. And also we discussed
Yes.
about this XML reformat. This XML reformat, we have to remember the XML functions, right? XML
Mm.
predefined functions, so that we can use those predefined functions for parsing that XML data. If it is if we are getting XML data in a column, if you want to parse it, so we have to first parse it. After parsing it, so then we have to get the corresponding C data from the
Yeah.
tag name, right? So we have to get it from the tag
Yes.
name. We have to use get element, the element name, and then we have to say C data to get the value. So the same way for writing the input data as an XML document. So we have to use the XML functions, right? XML begin document, XML begin element, XML create element. So XML get XML create element. So then XML C data, right? So then XML end
Mm-hmm.
element, right? XML end document. So all these predefined
Correct.
functions that we have to use an XML format for formatting the XML data and writing it to the target, right? So these are all the topics that we
Yes.
discussed in the morning, right? So do you have any questions with respect to any of the topics that we discussed in the morning?
No.
Okay, fine. So now,
Yeah.
so we are going to see another way of so the XML data we can use it for web applications, right? So there is one another way
Correct.
of transmitting the data over the internet, so which is the JSON format. So when I say JSON, so it is JavaScript object notation. Okay, JavaScript
Yeah.
object notation. So it's a full form. Okay,
Notations.
JSON full form is JavaScript object notation. So why it is JavaScript object notation is, so it would require a parser JavaScript for parsing the JSON file. Okay, so parser is JavaScript. So we would need a
Java.
JavaScript. Yeah, we need a JavaScript to parse the JSON data. So that's the reason it is JavaScript object notation. So and also it is lightweight and easy to transport over the internet. Okay, so it is lightweight and easy to transport over the internet. Easy to transport
Yeah.
over the internet. So that's an advantage of going for the JSON data. So and also right, so you will make use of this JSON also for the web application. So let's take an example. So we have a web services provider. Okay, there are two persons. Okay, one is web services provider. It's a kind of a server. So and you will have the web services requester. Okay, web services
Mm.
requester. So web services requester is going to be your client application. Okay, web services requester. So this
Mm.
is your client application. So in order to communicate between the requester and the client, okay, in order to communicate between the requester and the provider, so the data will get transmitted in the form of, so the data will be transferred between the requester and the provider. Okay, the data will get transmitted between the requester and the provider in the form of XML or JSON. Okay, in the form of XML or JSON. Okay, so we normally use this JSON for the web-based application. So the applications of the JSON is, it is web-based application. As web application, I would say web application. We can use the JSON data for transmission, for transmitting the data over the internet. So, and also this JSON files, right? This JSON file supports different data types. Okay, the JSON supports multiple data types. So when I say multiple data types, so it supports integer, uh, float, string data type, date, date time, arrays, class and arrays also. It supports class and arrays. Okay. So these are all different data types which are supported by the JSON data type. So where in JSON, information is stored in the form of key value pair. Okay, so information is stored in the form of key value pair. Let me
Yes.
give an example. So if I give an example, I think it will be much more clear. I
Mm.
can show you an example. So we can take the same example of our e-store. So in the e-store, so we have the books related information, right? So if you have to store this in a JSON file, so it looks like this. So this is going to be your key. Okay, so here the books is going to be the key, and which is of the which is of the array class, which is of an array data type. Okay, which is of an array data type. So for this array data type, so you have the different elements of the array. So these are all the different elements. So you have two records. So where you are storing the two records in the form of key and then value. You can see the key is ID and the corresponding value. So this is how we store the data in the form of JSON. Okay, the same XML data. So here we are storing it in the form of JSON. So is this clear? Any question?
No, no, no.
Yeah, you can go through this. I think I'll give some time for going through this JSON file. So if you have any questions, we can discuss.
Jason, I have some background
Oh,
because
that's great.
okay, yeah. So I can relate for the JSON. XML, I never actually got a chance to work on.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah, right. So now moving on, right? So we have an utility. So like we have XML to DML. It is very easily relatable. Okay, so whatever we discussed for
Mm.
XML, right? So the same is related
XML.
for the JSON as well. So the
Yes.
utility here it is going to be JSON to DML utility. So where you have to provide the JSON file. Okay, so we have to provide the JSON file. So whenever you provide this JSON file to this JSON to DML utility, so the default character set for this utility is UTF-8. So it generates a record format like this. So here also it generates the record format with the type and the metadata type definition. Okay, so I can show you the DML. So I think if you have any questions in the DML, we can discuss. So here if you see, so string underscore t.
Yes.
So we are just saying string of a big Indian integer. It is more of an Indian as we are specifying, and the data type. So based on the length of this particular integer of 4, so it can accommodate that many number of bytes. So here also based on this integer of 4 maximum length that we can store for this integer of 4, so it can accommodate that many number of characters, that number of digits. So now you can see this book underscore t. So we are using this JSON decimal t or JSON string t for the column names ID, name, author. And we have this books underscore t. So for this books underscore t, so we are just making use of this book t type, and then we are creating a column book, and the JSON top t is very important. This JSON top t is nothing but so from where we have to start traversing the data. So this JSON top t, so we'll have this books, which is nothing but books underscore detail, books underscore detail. So now, so you have this metadata type. So this metadata type, we can see this. You can just see this book metadata type as JSON underscore top underscore t, JSON top t. So here it is. Ideally, it should be the books underscore t. So we created as books underscore t here, right? So we have to use the same type name. So this name we have to use, and we have to create a column for the JSON top T. So for this metadata type definition, so we have to specify from where we have to start traversing the data. So here in this case, it is going to be JSON top T.
Yes.
Okay. So this DML will get generated automatically. Okay, this DML will get generated automatically. Okay, so this DML will get generated automatically like this. Okay, so the DML will get generated automatically. So we can make use of this generated record format within the component, so that we can whenever you use this within the component, so we can be able to read the JSON file, and then we can write it to the output. Okay, we can write it to the output. So, any questions till now? So, any questions on how to create a record format, and how the record format looks like for the JSON data?
Uh, no, just here we don't have a parser like the Java in Java home which we are giving. That's what it is. The parser we are having, or
That's correct. So there is no need to specify an explicit parser.
okay,
That's right.
parser, no? Right.
Correct.
Okay.
There is no need for an explicit parser. That's correct.
Okay.
Do you have an idea
Yeah.
about this Indianness? Do you have the idea about this Indianness? So here we are specifying this big Indian or little Indian, right?
Uh, yeah. Few week back, actually, I just read it.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, because it's actually I was working on the administrator Hadoop integration project now. So over
Right.
there, yeah, for the high they were using this big Indian integer.
Mm, mm,
So
mm.
yeah, yeah. But currently I'm not able to recall what actual the size
Not a problem. I can tell.
is.
Yeah, not a problem. So it is more about the storage. Okay. So how we are going to store the data in the
Yes,
memory.
yes,
Okay. So for this
yes.
little Indian, right? So this little Indian where we store least significant bit first into the memory. But it's little Indian, least significant first into the memory. If it is a big Indian, so we'll store most significant bit first into the memory. So when I say LSB or MSB, I will tell what I'm referring here. So let's say I have a character A. So this character A will be represented. This character A will have an ASCII code associated with this, right? So 67. So this
Yes,
ASCII code will be stored in the memory in the form of ones and zeros, correct? So it will be stored in the form of ones and zeros.
binary
So if it is
format.
an
Yeah.
8-bit processor, so it will get stored with this, stored like this, right? So if it is little endian, okay, if it is little endian, so your least significant bit, so this one will get stored first into the memory. So which is, so say for example, you have the memory location starting from 1000, 1001, 1002, 1003, like this it goes on. Okay, so this in the 1000 it stores the least significant bit first. So in 1001, then again the next to the least significant bit, then 0. So here also it is 0. So now, if it is MSB first, so it is reversed. So here it is little endian. If it is big Indian, it is reversed. Your most significant bit will get stored in the memory first. So which is nothing but, so your 10, it is starts with 1011. So it is mostly on how we are going to store the data in the memory. Okay, so for specifying that, so we are using this little Indian or big Indianness. Clear?
Yeah, clear. But
Hmm.
actually, when practically when we go for the little means big Indian and little
Based on the file types. Based on the file types. Okay, so based on the file types. So
okay,
when the file is created in Unix or Linux or Windows file system, so then it is
okay,
a
okay,
little
okay,
Indian file. So if the file is created, okay, if the file is created on the mainframe or the web-based application or web-based applications, then we can go for this big Indianness. Based on where we are
okay,
creating the file, so based on where we are creating the file, so we can make use of the Indianness, whether it is little Indian or a big Indian.
okay. Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah, this clarity I don't have it actually. Thanks.
Yeah, not a problem. So, so that's the reason. So your Hadoop files, right? So HDF files which are
Yes,
created in the
yes, yes, yes.
system
So
will make use of
source is actually important from where we are getting the
exactly. That's correct.
data.
So based on that, the Indianness will get determined. That's right.
Okay, okay. Yeah, clear.
And then, so now with this DML, right? So now we will see what are all the components that we have in Abinitio for doing the for parsing the JSON data, right? So
Yeah.
components, so components in Abinitio, we have we control you. So we have a read JSON, we have write JSON, We have the XML to JSON. Okay, this is an useful component. Okay, XML to JSON. We can convert an XML file to a JSON file, and we have another component called extract JSON. Okay, these four are the components that we have. Okay, so we will see about these components one by one. Okay, so here the read JSON, right? The read JSON is not like the XML split. So what the XML split will does is, so it just read the data and then flatten it out also, correct?
Yes.
But read JSON will not flatten the data. Okay, so it is only for reading the JSON file and writing the
Mm.
JSON file as a record vector in the target. It will just write the JSON file as a record vector in the target. In order to flatten this record vector, we need to use a component. So what is the component that we have to use to flatten this record vector? So you will get only the record vector in the
Yeah,
target.
normalize,
Correct.
normalize,
You have to explicitly use a normalized component. That's right.
normal.
So we'll see this. So we have this input file component, right? So then you have the read JSON. After this read JSON, so you have to normalize the data. After normalizing this data, then you can write it to an output file. Okay. This is how we have to do. Okay. So let's see the usage of this read JSON component. Okay. So let's see the usage of this read JSON component. So this read JSON component is to read the JSON document. Okay. So it reads the JSON document. Okay. It reads the JSON document, which is in the form of var string or var void. So what do you mean by var string? So var string or var void, parse it and write it as a record vector in the target. So it just does a parsing and then write it to the target. So your input should be a var string or var void. So when I say var string, so this is the variable length string. So when we say variable length string, so here the size of the string data type is determined by another data type. Correct. So based on the
Yes.
integer of maximum length, as the size of this particular string data type will get determined. This is the var string. So your input file, whenever in the input file component, when you specify the JSON file location, you have to specify the JSON file location, and you have to define this record format like this. So you have to define it as var string or var void. So if it is var void, it is void of int. So instead of string, it has to be void. So you have to say void of int of JSON data. Okay, you can either define it as var string or var void. So the location for this component, you can find it under translate folder. So ports for this component, you will have an input port and output port. Parameters for this component, before discussing on the parameters, so what are all the information that we need? So if you want to read the JSON, so what are all the parameters that we need to specify?
JSON file name.
Uh, but file name, we are reading it from the input, right? So in the input,
Okay,
we
okay,
are
okay. Okay, in the input file USP.
after reading the input file, after reading the file within this read JSON component. So what are all the parameters that we have to specify? So this is more with respect to this is so this is input file record format. I have provided this. This is your input file record format. So now
Yes.
within the read JSON, what are all the parameters that we have to configure for interpreting the JSON data? What are all the parameters that we have to configure?
So, okay. Mm,
We need a
okay.
transform, right?
In
So
the
we can write. Hmm.
in so you meant to say in the read JSON, right?
Yeah, in the read JSON component, so there is a parameter called a package, which is similar to the transform parameter in the reformat component. So where you have to write a logic to parse the input JSON data received as a var string. So you are getting the data as var string or var void, right? So we have to parse the var string or var void, okay, var void, and write it as a flow of records in the output. Flow of records in the output. package we have to
So,
specify, and there is one other thing that we have to specify. Okay, I will show you the content of the package. Okay, I'll show you the content what we have to define within the package. It is very simple only. I can show you. Okay, so the next thing is JSON data fields name. Data fields name. So we have to specify the column which has the JSON data. So input column which has the JSON data. Can you tell me the input column which has the JSON data?
whatever the keys that we are having.
Yeah, what is that? No, it is not
Mm,
the key. Input data fields name, which means input column which has the JSON data. So which input column is having the JSON data?
JSON, okay, which and
Which
JSON
input data?
underscore data,
Yeah, yeah, that's
which
right. That's what
input
I'm.
data.
Yeah, that's correct. So JSON underscore data is the column, input column that is having the JSON data. So we have to specify
Mm-hmm.
that for this JSON data fields name. So we have to specify in which column, input column, we have the JSON data. So that within the package, we can write the logic to read from that particular column and then parse it and write it to the output. Okay, so we have to specify the input column which has the JSON data. So in this example, JSON underscore data is the input column which has the actual JSON data. Correct. So we have to
Okay, that
specify that.
metadata type, I think that metadata type from where it has to pass, start pass.
Mm, no. Hold on. So this is my input file. Correct. This is my input file. So this is my record format for this
Okay.
input file. Correct. So
Mm-hmm.
this is the column. This JSON underscore data is the column. So which is going to have the JSON data. Right. So within this, so you have only one column in the input. Right. So that one column is going to have the JSON data like this. Right. So it is going to have the JSON data like this. So we are going to read this JSON data as a var string, variable length string, using the var of int of JSON data, that is string of int of JSON data. So now for this read JSON component, so we have to specify the input column which has the JSON data. So the column which has the JSON data is going to be JSON underscore data. So or you can just say, instead of confusing this name, I can just give it as data. So here for the JSON data field names, you have to give data. Whenever you
Okay,
give
okay.
data, hmm,
Okay, so you meant to say that scalar will have to get it converted into the vector to get
mm,
the
input JSON. I would refer input JSON,
input
input
JSON.
column,
Yeah,
yeah, input JSON
yeah.
to the vector, record vector. That's correct.
So that's in a vector, right? So
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. That's correct.
so we can use the string split function, but
Uh,
we
not required.
no
Not required.
no no.
Not required. You can do it very easily. I will tell. Not required.
Okay,
Okay, we can do it very easily. I will tell what we have to do. Okay. So what we have to do is, so for this, right? So we have to write a package, right? So within the
mhm,
package, so what we have to do is within the package only we have to specify the DML, which is generated out of the XML to JSON utility. So this is, say
hmm,
for example, if I am generating the DML and I'm storing this DML in a file under the DML directory. So till the ADML books underscore JSON.dml, I have to include that, okay, within the package. So I'm just
mhm,
writing a logic for the package within the package. So I have to first include this books underscore JSON.dml file. After I specify that, so we have to define one function, okay, which is out colon colon create output in comma decoded JSON. Okay, in comma decoded JSON. So input is nothing but your input data. So which is your in dot data. So this is going to be your in dot data. So that will be given as an input for this create output function. So what this create
mhm.
output function will do is, so it will get the input JSON file and it will try to interpret that input JSON file based on this DML, books JSON.dml. It will try to
Okay,
interpret the input data based on the DML definition. So once it interprets the data based on the DML definition, it will write the data to this decoded JSON. Okay, it will write the data to this decoded JSON variable. So what we have to do is we have to just assign this decoded JSON to the target. So we have to just simply write this. We have to say out colon colon decoded JSON. That's it. So in the output, you will get the decoder JSON in the output. So the output record format should be this record format. So we have to use this as an output record format. So in the output port of the read JSON component, so we have to specify this record format. Okay, so the output record format should be this ADML slash books underscore JSON dot DML. That's it. So
Mm,
it does the parsing and then write it to the target. So once it is written to the target, then we can use normalized component to flatten the data. So we have to explicitly use a normalized component to flatten the data. Yes, but before that, any questions?
mm, yeah, I'm still confused with the use of decoded join. Decoded system.
See, this is more of an internal variable, predefined. It's more
Okay,
of a
okay, okay,
result
okay.
Ab initio
Okay,
specific
okay,
keywords.
okay, okay,
So what this
okay.
in will do is this in is an it's in is
Yeah,
an keyword, so which gets the
value from the,
uh,
yeah,
yeah JSON data from the input.
yes, yes,
So after that, then what it does is based on the DML, based on the DML created using JSON to DML
the
utility,
utility,
right?
yeah, okay,
It
okay,
parses the input JSON data and write it to decoder underscore JSON. This decoder JSON is nothing but the result. So in the dynamic programming, we use result, right? So if you use
yes,
multiple statements, we can assign the results to the result variable. The
mm-hmm.
same way, decoded JSON is a variable, internal variable. So to the internal variable, we are just writing the results. After we write the
Yes,
results, we are just mapping the results to the output. That's it.
yep, yes.
Right. So any questions? Any question on this read JSON?
No,
Now we know how to read this data. After you read this data, then you can use a normalized component. So in the normalized component, you can write a logic to convert the record vector into the individual rows. So where what you have to do is you have to specify the length of books vector. So this is the vector, right? So length of the book. So based on the length of this book, so you have to define the length, and based on the index, so you
mm,
have to get the corresponding columns and map it to the target. Okay.
yes,
Right. So now we will see on how to write the data using the write JSON component. So write JSON component so is to create a JSON document. Okay. So this writes JSON document by making use of input data. Okay. By making use of the input data formatted by making use of an input data formatted by making use of an input data. Okay. By making use of an input data by making use of an input data. So by making use of an input data using formatted using XML to JSON utility, XML to JSON utility. Okay, XML to JSON utility to the output as a JSON data. I think I am confusing here. Let me put it in a different way. So I would say uh, writes a DML record which is produced using XML to JSON utility to the output as a JSON data. So in the output, yeah, it is going to write as a JSON data. It is going to write as a JSON data, right? So in the output, it is going to write as a JSON data. So for the input, so input must be formatted, right? So input must be formatted to the format of the XML to JSON utility generated record format. So location, you can find this component under translate folder. Ports for this component, input port, output port. So parameters, I will come to this parameters, but before this, so I will create a flow. What are the components that you have to use? So you have to use an input file component to read the data. After you read this data, so then you have to, can you tell me the component that you have to use to format the input data, format the input scalar data, formatted to JSON to utility generated, JSON to DML utility generated data. What is the component that you have to use? So then we can use write JSON and then write it to an output file. Can you tell me the component? So which
Reads
converts scalar into, the component should convert scalar into a record vector. The component should convert scalar into a record vector.
scalar into the vector, then same as we use as a read JSON and the normalize.
Correct. So there you are
No,
using
no,
normalize.
scalar into the vector, then scalar into the vector, then still read JSON.
No, no. So in the, see, if it is a JSON file, you can use JSON. Here it is not a JSON file.
Okay.
I can show you the input file content.
Oh,
My
okay,
input
okay,
file
okay,
contents are
okay.
like this.
Here where you we are okay, okay, okay,
Yeah, yeah, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
okay. No, I got it. Yeah, here we are creating a JSON file
Yeah, that's right. So we have to convert this
from
input
the
data.
normal flat file.
Yeah, we have to convert this. We have to convert this into a record vector. So which is nothing but you have to say vector. So within the vector, you need to have records.
Yeah.
So for the record, so it is like ID. So which is 101. So then you have the title. So which is C programming, and then you have an author. So for the author, it is Dennis Ritchie. How do we do that? How do we convert multiple rows into a record vector?
Multiple rows into the, yeah. Then we can have it in the reformat. We can use the, oh sorry, uh,
But
just
reformat, the
give me a
problem
minute.
is it will not
No, no,
recall the
reformat.
previous value.
Uh, okay, okay, okay.
You can do it.
Uh,
I'm not saying you cannot do it with the reformat. You can do it. You can create a global variable and then you can do it with the global
yeah.
variable. You can do it. But why we need to complicate things? So there is a component which will make our life simpler. What is the component that we can use? What is the reverse of
Just
normalize? What is the reverse of normalize? So you have a normalized
yeah,
data.
the
What is
yeah
the
roll
inverse
up.
of?
We can
Yeah,
yeah
that's right.
roll up. We can go and use
Rollup
that.
or denormalize. Yeah, we can use
Yeah.
rollup for denormalize. Correct. So you can use rollup for formatting the input data into the JSON to utility, JSON to DML utility generated, which is your record vector, scalar to record vector. After that, you can use write JSON file. The write JSON file, you have to specify some parameters. I will tell what are all the parameters that you have to specify. So the parameter that we have to specify for this write JSON is going to be package. So within the package, you have to write the logic to map the input data to the JSON output. Okay, so we have to write a logic, convert the input formatted data into JSON document. Okay, so I will tell here also the logic is simple. So here also you will have, so you will have the here also you need to specify the function called the create output. So here it is going to be an input data, right? So here it is an input data. Then you will have the JSON data. Okay, you'll have the JSON. This is a variable. So like we have a variable, right? So here decoded JSON is the variable that we have. Similar to that, so we
Mm,
have a variable called the JSON
okay.
underscore data. Data info is another info which will have the information about that. So we'll not make use of this data info. So what we have to do is in the target. So the target record format is like this. Okay, the target record format is a var string or var void. So it is like record and end. So within this record and end, so we can give var string or var void. So if it is var string, so let's say var string, it is going to be string of integer, then JSON underscore data. That's it. So what we need to do is, so we need to specify the in the target we have out.json data, so which is nothing but your input data. Your input data should be converted into a JSON document internally, and the results will be stored in a variable called JSON underscore data. So what we need to do is we need to just make use of that variable, and we can map it to the target. That's it. So this will write the formatted JSON data to the target. Okay, clear?
Okay, sir. Yeah.
That's it. Only package you have to specify. So for the package, you have to write the logic. Logic is nothing but, so you have to define. So in the target, we have JSON underscore data, which is a var string column. So for that var string column, so we have to assign the result. The result is stored in JSON underscore data. JSON underscore data is a predefined keyword. So that will have the details of the converted JSON document. The converted JSON document, you can map it to the JSON underscore data column. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions? So I
Uh,
think, yep. Hmm.
Here we are using XML to JSON utility, right?
No, no, no. It is
So
next topic, next topic. So just see
no,
if
no.
you have
In
any
the
questions.
right
No, in
JSON.
the right JSON, we are not using XML to JSON. Oh, okay, okay. You are saying this. Okay, okay, okay. Produced from JSON to DML, right? It is JSON to DML. It is a mistake. It is
Yeah.
JSON to
Okay.
DML.
Okay.
Anything else?
Mm-hmm. Nothing.
Okay. Now we'll move on to the next one. So you can convert the XML document into a JSON also. Okay, so you can convert the
Mm.
XML document into a JSON document using this XML to JSON component. Okay, so we can do that. So what you have to do is, so we have to specify the parameters. So the parameters that you have to specify here is, so we have to specify the package here. So within the package, you have to write the logic to convert the XML into JSON. Okay, we have to write the logic to convert the XML data into JSON data.
Yes.
The logic that we have to write here is, here also it is very simple. Okay, here also it is very simple. So in the target, so we have to specify the parser. Okay, we have to specify the parser for parsing the XML document, right? So it is a parsing the XML document, right? So we have to specify the parser. So the parser that we have to specify here is, so we have to specify the parser as the default is expat. So if you want, you can change the parser. The default is
Yes.
expat. So if you want, if it is not working, then you can change it to X series parser. So then here also you will have a create data. So in the create data, you will have two columns. Okay, here you will have two columns. One is input data. So you have to pass the input data to this create output. The input is an XML data. So and what this component will do is, this component will internally convert that XML data into the JSON document and store the results to the JSON underscore data. So once it stores the results to this JSON underscore data, we can just get the results from this JSON underscore data column and write it to the target. So in the target, so we need to make use of the DML generated using this. We have to make use of the DML generated using XML JSON to DML utility, right? So in the output file, so an output file or the output port. So I would say the record format in the output port. Okay, output port record format. So we should make use of, so use the DML generated using JSON to DML utility. Okay, so whatever the DML which gets generated from the JSON to DML utility, we have to use that, use that for use that here, so that we can write the input data to the output. So let's say your generated record format is this one, right? So generated record format is this one. JSON top T is the generated record format. So here what you have to do is, we have to use this JSON top T. So here we have to use JSON top T, out.json top T. So we have to get the JSON data and then map it to the target. Clear?
Yes. Yes.
Right. So now
Yeah.
let's take this example. Okay, let's take this example. So you have to tell me how we can parse this data. Okay, so this is my input data. So I have an input file. So in the input file, I have file name and the JSON data. So it is having the file name in one column and it has the corresponding JSON data in another column. The same way, so it can have multiple records. Okay, so it can have multiple records. The input record format looks like this. So where it has file name in one column and the JSON data as a var string in another column. So how do you read this data? How do you read and parse this data? You have an input file. So
Okay.
where you have the
Yeah.
JSON data stored in one column. So the input
Okay.
record format looks like this. So for reading this data, we can use an input file component to read
Input
this
file.
data. Yeah, after reading this data, then
Yes.
what is the component that we
Read.
have to use? And then,
Yeah. Read JSON.
yes, yes, perfect. So we can use read JSON,
It's read
right? We
JSON.
can use read JSON. Yeah, we can use read JSON. So let's say your input data, okay, your input data is in the binary format. Okay, your input data is in the binary format. So when I say binary format, I can show you what does this binary format looks like. This is how your input data looks like. Okay, so let's say your input data looks like this. So instead of the actual JSON data, your input data looks like in the form of binary data. If it is in the binary data, then what we need to do? So we cannot do it with read JSON directly. We cannot do it with the read JSON directly. So we need to make use of another component called extract JSON message. Okay, we have to use another component called extract JSON message. If it is in a binary
Okay.
format, okay? So we have to use a component called extract JSON message. So what this component does is reads the block of input JSON messages, gathers, okay, it gathers until the end of the message, until the end of the message is reached, and write it as JSON output so that read JSON component, read JSON can read the combined XML, combined JSON.
Okay.
Okay, so it is like, so what this extract JSON message, okay, what this extract JSON message will do is this extract JSON message will read this block of input JSON messages. So, and then what it does is, so it converts this into file name followed by, say, file name followed by JSON underscore data. So what it does is the file name is going to be
Mm-hmm.
books.json. So this will convert this binary format. It will just read all the records and it combines all the record and write it as one JSON document. So one JSON document is nothing but this is the one JSON document. It just write it as one JSON document like this. So once it writes the data in one JSON in the JSON format, then after this we can use read JSON, right? So after this, then you can use read JSON to
Okay.
read the JSON document and write it into the output. Okay, so we have to use this extract JSON message if the input data is in the form of block of input JSON message. It is more of a binary format. So if the JSON data is in the form of binary format, right? If the JSON data is in the form of binary format, only then we have to use this extract JSON message. Otherwise, there is no need to use the extract JSON message component. So it is under translate. So you have input port and output port. So we have to define the parameter. So here also we have to specify the package. So in the package, we have to write the logic. You have to write the logic. You have to write the logic to create the JSON document, and also we have to specify the JSON data fields name. Okay, JSON data fields name, and also we have to specify one another thing called source key. Okay, we have to specify the source key also. So source key we have to specify. So JSON data field name is nothing but, so we have to specify the column which has the JSON data. Okay, which has the JSON data. So source key is nothing but so column, so key specifier to group the input data. Okay, so it's a key specifier to, it is a key specifier to group the input data. So can you tell me what is the key specifier to group the input data? Maybe I can give the input data input record format. So you can tell me from the input record format. So you can tell me what is the value that we have to provide for JSON data field name and what is the value that we have to provide for. So I'll give the input record format. Okay, the input record format looks like this. Okay, so where you have string of pipe file name. So and you have the JSON data as void of integer, and you have this JSON data. Okay, it can be a void of integer or string of integer, anything. It can be a var string or it can be a void string. So say you can keep it as var string. Okay, so this is JSON underscore data. So you have two columns in the input. Okay, you have two columns in the input. So if you have two columns in the input, so which column that you should use for JSON data field names? Which column should be used for JSON data field name? So we have to specify data field names. So what is the column that we have to use for the data field name? So we have to specify the column which has the
Okay,
JSON data.
it's JSON data. Yeah,
Yeah, correct. JSON data. How about the source key? The
key.
source key is nothing but the key specifier to group the input data. So the key specifier that we have to use to group the data. So here, what is the
Group the
key that we
input
have to
data and
use?
then
Yeah. So
that
here, what is the key?
books.json.
No, 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 no. See, the key is going to be, yeah, books.json, which is nothing but file name, right? So here,
Yeah.
based on the file name, we have to group all these data and we have to write it as one single record, right? It is more like your denormalize operation that you're trying to do. So here we
Yes.
have multiple JSON messages. We are just going to concatenate all the JSON messages into one single document. So for writing it as one single
Yes.
document, so we have to specify the key. So here the key is going to be file name. So in this example, it is going to be file name. Right, so it is going to be file name, right? So this file name we have to provide as a source key. So once you provide the file name as a source key, we have to define the logic. The logic is straightforward here. Okay, the logic is very straightforward here. So so within the package, okay, within the package we have to write the logic. So the logic is more similar to the read JSON component. So whatever the logic that we write for the read JSON components, it is the more similar logic. Okay, so here also the same. So you have an input data for the input. So here you have to specify the what is that? So we have to specify the include statement where you have to say tilde dollar AI underscore DML books underscore JSON dot DML
Mm-hmm.
command semicolon. So then create output. So for this create output, so we have to say in comma decoded JSON, right? So in comma decoded JSON. So and we have to map the output with the decoded JSON.
Yes.
Right. So, any questions? Any questions with respect to this extract JSON message component?
No, just
You
when
are trying
actually
to
we are
understand why
getting.
we have extract JSON message, right? So we can do it with the read JSON component itself. Why we are having this extract JSON message? Is that your question?
I'm not sure whether we can read the binary data with the
Yeah, we
read
cannot read the
JSON.
binary data. We cannot read the binary data. That
Yeah.
is the reason we have this extract
Yes.
JSON
Yes.
message. We cannot read the
Yeah.
binary data. Using the
Yes.
read
Yes.
JSON,
Yes.
we cannot read the binary data. So for that
But
reason only, we have this extract JSON message to read the binary data and combine it. So
okay.
combine multiple multiple records into one single JSON document.
Okay. But usually when we are reading the data from a particular machine or kind of a thing, then and only then how when actually we are getting the binary data in the JSON file or
Okay.
or
Okay.
from the.
So yeah. So there is one another component. Okay. There is one another component. Okay. Like this extract JSON message. So you can write
Mhm.
the message in the form of binary format while writing the data using Abinitio. So it is more
Mhm.
like, so when it's binary format, so it has to be written by some process, right? So which is nothing but, so it will get created by the Abinitio only. So like we have
Okay.
extract JSON message, we have another component called encode JSON message. We have a component called encode JSON message. Using the encode JSON message, you can create the JSON data like this.
Okay.
Okay. There is one more component. So I haven't mentioned that component here. So it is encode JSON message. So using that encode JSON message, so we can convert the JSON data, right, into, we can convert the
Mm-hmm.
JSON data into the block of input, binary data. It's a kind of a binary data we can convert.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay.
Right. So is this clear? So if it is binary data, so we have to use the extract JSON messages, right? So let's say if you get the data in multiple fields, okay, if you get the data in
Mm-hmm.
multiple, if I want to combine all those fields, then what is the approach that we have to use? So let's say if it is multiple records with the binary data, if it is multiple JSON document, so here you have multiple records, books JSON. So here also you can again have 1 minute, 1 minute. So you can have one more record. Let's say you can have one more other record. So like this with the different values. Okay, so you have one more record. So where you have some other details, 1002, 2003. So if I have to combine this and if I have to write it as one single JSON document, so how do I write it as one single JSON document? So where in which, so I can get the data like this. Okay, so till comma in one document, the remaining things I can get it in another line like this. So instead of getting all this in one single line, so I'm going to get this in multiple lines. So if I get this in multiple lines, then what we have to do, so the entire JSON message we are getting in the form of multiple records. So you can see the first record, so we are getting it from the first line. So the second record, we are getting it from the second line. So if it is the case, then what we have to do? So we have an input file like this. So you have to read this input file. After reading this input file, so you have to write it as one
Can
single record. Yeah, what is the component that you have to use? So what is the component that we have to
read.
use before the read JSON? Yeah, roll up. That's correct. Read JSON. So after that, you can write it to an output file. That's correct. Perfect. We can use roll up. So we can use null key, and then we can write it as one
Yes.
single record. So that one single record, you can combine all this data and write it into one single record in the target. After that, you can use read JSON to parse the JSON data and then write it to the output.
Uh, we'll have to use roll up after read, right, Jason? Na?
Uh, it
Because
is it is null key, right? So we can use null key. So the null key with so we can use null key. So with the null key, and you have to specify the record format. So in the output, so has to be JSON underscore data. So the JSON underscore data is going to be string of integer, so string of integer. So we have to say concatenation. So we have a function, right? In the rollup, we have a function called
okay,
concatenation.
okay.
So what the concatenation does? So it just concatenate all the string values, input string
Yeah.
values. So we can use this
Okay.
concatenation function
It is
and then
unable
map
to
it to the
click
target.
here.
So there is no need
Okay,
to
okay.
specify any delimiter. We have to just use this concatenation
Okay.
function
That
without the,
aggregation function will help me,
yeah,
right?
instead of aggregation, here it is concatenation. That's right. That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Clear? Is this clear? Any questions?
No, no, no.
Okay, fine then.